Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. What's happening, everybody? It is Eric Rosen Day here on the Perpetual Chess Podcast. International Master Eric Rosen, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It's great to be here. Huge fan of the podcast, so looking forward to it.
Thanks. Yeah, I know that you at minimum turned your dad onto the podcast, so I appreciate that. If anyone's wondering why Eric's so strong, I think it's because you've been spreading the word about the podcast. Every new listener you bring in, I think, gains one's rating by about 50 points. I've heard. People
yeah, that's
are
possible. I mean, I'm huge. I'm myself and my dad are huge podcast addicts, and we consume a lot of different shows. But this is definitely one of my favorites. So,
excellent. Well, okay. I mean, obviously, we're going to get to chess in a minute, but tell me a couple other ones. What else are you guys into?
Well, for me, I'm a huge fan of Reply All by Gimlet Media. I'm very into like web development and tech stuff, and they do a good job of presenting a lot of like interesting stories related to the internet, but also like the classics like TED, This American Life. I'm sure there's tons of others that I'm forgetting right now, but
nice, yeah, I like a lot of the more popular ones too. I've actually never checked out Reply All, but some of Gimlet Media's other ones I'm a big fan of.
Another one too, Tim Ferriss. I actually wanted to ask you if you listened to that, because it, I think, relates very much to what you're doing with these sort of long form interviews.
I do, yeah. I pick and choose based on the guest, and Tim Ferriss doesn't need my support, but
sure.
So I have a couple quibbles with his format, I have to say, but his guests are amazing. So
for sure.
I basically pick and choose, but overall I have an incredible amount of respect for the career he's built and all the like insane physical tasks he does and stuff like
course.
that.
There was actually an episode not too long ago. He did one on like his process of interviewing. So if you haven't listened to that one, I found it really, really interesting.
Okay.
I thought you could probably benefit from it too.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but
I mean, it's intended to be like a good resource. I mean, I'm not intended to be an insult. For
no,
sure.
I know. I'm just kidding. I've listened to a lot of like the Meta podcast, the podcast about podcasts,
Sure.
the podcast about interviewing and stuff. So I'm definitely have things to learn. So the other thing I wanted to start out with, Eric, of course, is you just came from the Sinquefield Cup. So we're going to get into sort of the broad sweep of your young chess career and your life, but I want to get the boots on the ground report since you got back from there, and as we record, you're going to be heading back there shortly.
Yeah, of course. Well, just to set the record straight, I didn't play in the Sinquefield Cup. I just
right.
I was working as sort of a Twitter person for US Chess. So yeah, it was actually really enjoyable. I spent a couple days over the weekend taking over the US Chess Twitter feed and essentially tweeting nonstop during the rounds. And I will say it's a lot less stressful than actually playing chess. Tweeting about it, it's a lot more fun.
Yeah. I mean, probably lower highs, but higher lows as well on an emotional level. I mean, it's probably not, the peak moments aren't as fun as actually playing chess, but yeah, more relaxing for sure.
Well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I had to basically worked until the last game of the round, but it was really enjoyable, kind of combining like the chess aspects, but also like photographing the players and of taking a creative take of various moments. So yeah, definitely something I'm looking forward to doing again.
Yeah, and for that tournament having such a sort of large scale in the chess world, I mean, people pay so much attention to it, but I get the impression that it's kind of like it's not that many people there if you go there. Is that, I mean, like between the spectators and the players and the entourages and the working crew, like how many people would you say like encompass the Sinquefield like social circle when you're there?
Well, I would say on the weekends it's a lot more crowded, and like especially like during the start and maybe finish of each round, like usually the playing hall is just packed with spectators, and it's not the biggest space compared to maybe some of other elite tournaments. But I would say, I mean, they attract like throughout the day, they attract at least like 200, 300, 400 people. So, I mean, it's a nice setup that they have because as a spectator, you can watch live in the playing hall. You can watch the live commentary kind of in the club area. You can also watch the extra live commentary at Kingside Diner, where they have, I think it was Eric Hansen and Veruja Nakobian doing it for the live audience. So there's a lot of places you can kind of go around, and it's actually not easy to get bored during like the 5 or 6 hour round.
That's a big compliment for a live chess event, for a classical chess event.
For sure, yeah, and it's like that at like a lot of the events they run. Like I had the pleasure of attending during U.S. championships too, and is essentially the same format. I mean, not only do they do a great job for the players, but for the spectators, it's pretty awesome.
Nice. And when you head back there in a couple days, are you going to have the same? Are you going to be tweeting again?
Yeah. So the plan is I will take over the U.S. Chess Twitter feed during the first round of the St. Louis Blitzen Rapid and then the last round. I'm really looking forward to it because, of course, the Kasparov return should be epic to say the least.
Yeah,
I'm sure before or by the time this podcast is released, the event will already have happened. So
yeah, well, this one's got a quicker turnaround than most. So barring technical difficulties, this is Friday night. This will come out Tuesday. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, when is
you don't kick over the microphone?
Exactly. Yeah. So when does it start?
Assuming I remember my calendar, I think Monday. So
okay.
I'll have just tweeted about the first round.
Nice. Yeah. So what do you think about Kasparov's chances in the event?
I really don't know what to expect. I actually attended during the match he had against Nigel Shorts. I think this was back in 2015. And it was just an exhibition match, but he completely rolled over Short. It was a completely lopsided match. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does well in the event. I mean, I don't think he would take first place just given his age, but I mean, I'm sure he's capable of finishing above 50%.
Wow, that would be incredible. I mean, I agree, but still, it's like until he does it, you kind of have to see it to believe it. But I mean,
sure.
No reason he can't do it. So what were your impressions of the chess in the Sinquefield Cup so far? I mean, actually, we can talk about it. We can post-mortem the classical, being that it just ended.
Oh, the chess itself.
Yeah.
I mean, the tournament just wrapped up today, and I wasn't able to follow the games too closely, like the final rounds. I've been busy teaching a lot, but the chess itself, it seemed to be a lot more bloody compared to other events, like a ton of decisive games. And it really was up in the air coming down to the last round. And as a spectator, that's what you want to see.
Yeah. A lot of wins with black, relatively speaking.
Right. Yeah. And like a lot of blunders. I think that was one of the things, or one of the reasons why Kasparov wants to come back, just realizing like all the blunders at this like top level play. He wants to come back and prove himself that he can maybe be a bit more solid than these top players.
Yeah. I mean, I hope he's right. And I know he said, I'm sure you probably saw that he basically tried to quash any talk of this being like the start of a bigger comeback. But hope springs eternal. So I guess we have to root for him to do his best, and then hope that like he can't resist after that.
Yeah, let's hope so. That would be really cool.
Cool. Well, so before the Sinquefield Cup, Eric, I've had you on my list as a guest for a while now, and then I know that you took this epic trip in Europe, like playing chess tournaments all over the place, presumably having some fun in between. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about this summer chess vacation you just got back from?
Sure. Yeah, I got back beginning of August, like August 1st, and it was about a 2-month trip. And going into it, it was kind of spontaneous. I booked a ticket back in April, and I didn't really have the whole thing planned out. I should note for the people who don't know, I graduated from Webster University in May. And like a month before graduation, I didn't really have any like post-graduation plans. And I had some friends playing various tournaments in Europe, and I thought it would be a good chance to kind of combine chess and travel and continue working and teaching online. So yeah, looking back on it, it was a really great experience. I mean, there are so many different aspects of the trip between the chess and just like other non-chess related experiences. But overall, I visited, I think, like 8 or 9 different countries. And I mean, it was like nonstop traveling, and towards the end, it was pretty tiring. But overall, it was a blast.
Nice. Well, I think I know what the chess highlight was.
What you tell me.
I mean, beating Simon Agatstein again. I feel terrible that I may or may not be butchering his name, but obviously, his reputation speaks for itself. That's quite an achievement, and the game was pretty cool. And that was, you had a good tournament besides that. In that tournament I never heard of, Excelsior. Was that in Norway? Where were you for that one? It
was in Denmark, just outside Copenhagen.
Nice. Great city.
And yeah, Copenhagen was really nice. Got to spend like one day there. The city that the tournament was in was kind of desolate. Not too much going on there. But yeah, it was a really nice, well-run event. And yeah, I had the opportunity to play Agustin, which in itself was a highlight, and then beating him, of course, was one of the biggest highlights of the trip. I will say the game, like on his part, maybe wasn't entirely impressive. Like he kind of disobeyed a lot of like early opening principles, and then like just didn't develop quickly enough, didn't castle early enough, and then just ran into trouble very quickly. So yeah,
well, you still have to win the game, though. I mean,
that is true. Yeah.
I mean, it's it's one thing to get an advantage against guys like that, but to actually, to bring it home is never that easy.
Sure.
So did he? Did you get a chance to talk to him about it at all, about the game?
No, unfortunately, like we didn't really talk after the game. I could tell that he was kind of not in the best mood.
Yeah.
And sometimes after like defeating much higher rated player, I'll let them initiate the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I think that's sportsmanlike. I think it's the right thing to do. I was curious mainly not so much from I was mainly curious if he like isolated, like, if he gave his perspective of what went wrong, but yeah, it's understandable that, you don't get to be 2,600 without getting upset when you have a bad loss.
Sure. I mean, I've like looked him up before the round, and like he seems like a really down to earth guy. Like I found some YouTube videos of like him teaching like some camp and giving a simul. And then after the game, I found some YouTube video of him. It was like him in a music video, and it was some kind of song about Magnus Carlsen. And I was so thankful that I didn't like find out about this video before the game, because the song would have just been stuck in my head.
That's hilarious. Well, I did see in your U.S. chess article, to your credit, you did say don't watch like TV and videos before the round. So I guess
that's true. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that at various moments of my tournaments, but yeah, I'll usually make an effort to like look up my opponents online, like in all various aspects, like their games, YouTube videos, any articles I can find. But yeah, he's like, Agustin is a really interesting guy, because he not only was Magnus Carlsen's former coach, but he also played like professional soccer for Norway, and he was in, I think, Chess the Musical.
Oh, wow.
Seems all around multi-talented.
I knew about the soccer. I did not know about Chess the Musical.
Uh-huh.
That's funny.
Yeah, I would recommend checking out his Wikipedia page because there's some interesting facts about him.
Nice. And you had some, so was that tournament your best result overall in your trip?
Well, it started off really well. Like after 6 rounds, I was tied for first with 5.5 out of 6.
Yeah.
Joe Bava and a few other like strong GMs. And then it completely fell apart. Like after I beat Agustin, I think I lost my last 3 out of 4 games. So it was somewhat of a disappointing finish. And I actually had to play one of the players who I was rooming with during the event. And we both knew each other so well, and he got the better of me in the opening. So it didn't, things didn't really end that well. But I think overall, like out of all the tournaments, it was still my best event.
Okay. And you probably still have some game analysis to do, but what's your general feeling about like how you played on the whole trip versus your goals going in?
Sure. Well, I will say that I didn't have too many like specific chess improvement goals going in. Like even though I'm an IM and like attaining the Grandmaster title is the obvious next step, like it's the obvious goal I can tell a lot of people. My main goal for the trip was to kind of leverage chess as like a vehicle for travel and like getting to see new places, meet new people. So actually going into the trip, I wasn't taking the chess like super seriously. I still wanted to do well. And overall, I feel like I played well. I think there were moments where I maybe got, I don't know, a little bit overambitious or maybe didn't quite make the right choices in hindsight. And especially towards the end of the trip, I was just, I was pretty exhausted between playing 4 tournaments and like constant traveling. It really takes a toll on my energy levels. And looking back on it, if I had to do it over again, maybe I wouldn't play so many tournaments back to back. But I mean, overall, I don't have too many regrets.
Yeah, and the schlepping can be exhausting too. Like it's sort of underrated aspect of these trips is like you get somewhere and like you're supposed to be doing things, but you want to recover from getting there.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, I did have breaks like between tournaments, but the tournaments that I played in, they were kind of spread out across Europe. Starting in, I started in Latvia. I went to Czech Republic, went to Romania, went to Spain, went to Denmark. So everything required air travel, and I mean, it was tiring, but it was filled with like so many cool and interesting experiences that, I mean, it was well worth it.
Nice. Do you have like one, could you isolate one standout sort of away from the chessboard experience that you would want to share?
Yeah, there were a lot of like just kind of cool travel moments. I'm trying to think of one. There were so many, like every place I went to was different. I will say that I really enjoyed kind of the scenery in Benasque, Spain. There's a tournament there, the Benasque Open, which is in a very small town in Spain about, I think it's like a 3-4 hour drive from Barcelona. And the population of the town is about 2,000 people. And over 500 people attended the tournament.
Wow. So
the 10 days that the tournament lasted, the town's population increased about 25%. But the town itself was a really cool place for a chess tournament. And I would spend the off time, like before rounds, just kind of walking like through the mountains, like away from the town. And they had like these nice trails, just kind of surrounded by nature. And I actually used that time to catch up on like the episodes of Perpetual Chess podcast.
Ah, nice.
So it was one of the more relaxing experiences of my trip, I would say.
Excellent. Cool. So let's rewind to before that. So you just graduated from Webster. and I know you were at U of Illinois before that. I want to talk about both of those, but let's go backward on this one. We often take it from childhood and then like move forward, but this time let's go back and talk about what was most recent first. So, what was your experience like? Studying with Susan Polgar and all those chess monsters over there in St. Louis.
Yeah, it was really cool. And it was different for me because, like, from my previous experiences in at University of Illinois and in high school, I was kind of used to being the top player in the room. But when I went to Webster, I mean, I was one of the weaker players on the team. And being surrounded by like so many strong and elite players, I mean, it was a phenomenal experience. And
Ray Robson, who else?
So Ray Robson, Laquang Liem, who was our top player. I think he's top 30 in the world. And then a lot of other strong grandmasters, Alexander Shimonov, Ilya Nizhnik.
Right, he's been doing great in the U.S. circuit.
Yeah, and it's a very diverse team. Like a lot of, or most of the players are like all from different countries. So I think there's some statistic, like at least maybe 9 or 10 different languages spoken between team members. So it's a diverse crowd, and you kind of learn a lot from hanging out around these very strong players.
Right, you learn a lot about chess, and I guess about the world, since so many different cultures are represented.
For sure.
So what do you notice chess-wise, like when you play blitz with guys like that?
Well, I will say that I've played a fair number of blitz games against Laquang Liem, like just in training. I've never even managed to draw him.
Wow. Let
alone win. Like he's beaten me twice in classical chess, and like any training game that we've played, he always wins, and he's just so consistent. And it's so hard to find like weaknesses in his play, and he manages his time so well. So I've definitely learned a lot from just his style of play. And I should note that like he won I think it was a World Blitz Championship back in, I want to say 2013.
Okay.
So to be able to kind of train with a player like that and see how they approach the game is a great way to learn.
So what did you notice about how he approaches the game and his overall style of play?
He's just so consistent. Like it's very hard to find a moment where he makes like a clear blunder. And like when I would play him, like we would get like reasonable positions, but just as the game progresses, he would slowly build up some advantage, and it kind of felt like how I would imagine playing Karpov would be, where like he just doesn't let you get anything, like stops all your plans, and has a very good sense of positional chess.
Wow. And how old is he? Do you know?
I should know, but I'm drawing a blank. I think he's like slightly older than me, maybe 25, 26.
Okay.
I helped develop his like personal website. So
nice. Yeah, I wanted to talk about your web wizardry. So you're a photographer, and you design apps too. I know you did Ben Feingold's site, right?
Yeah, so I've mainly focused in like web development, web design. I should note that it was actually kind of part of my major at Webster. The name of the major was called Interactive Digital Media, but it encompassed kind of a wide array of like digital technologies, ranging from web development, design, photography. So I think it suited my interests very well, and it's been able to kind of mesh well with chess. So nice.
And we'll get back to Webster and U of Illinois, but so going forward, what you mentioned, you didn't have any plans after you graduated. Do you think you're gonna stick? I know you teach chess. Do you think you're gonna stick with teaching chess, or are you gonna try to get like a web design job, or have you thought through that yet?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I will say that like the easy answer right now is I don't know, and I'm trying to still kind of self-explore and kind of identify all the possible opportunities before I commit to any one thing. I will say that because my trip is finished and I'll have some more free time, I'm going to be like starting job hunting very soon. And I am teaching chess like decent part-time, and I'm doing a lot of like kind of freelance web development projects too. So right now I'm kind of making enough to support myself and support my travels, but it is a question if I want to actually commit to maybe a more traditional job, or kind of continue what I've been doing and then expanding on that. But yeah, I'm still in kind of the figuring it out stage.
I mean, as you should be. You know, you're 24, right?
Turning 24 next month. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and it's good that you have two marketable skills. I mean, you know, you don't ever have to make a permanent decision. Just, you know, do what you feel like. Basically, you can do either one or both at any time. So.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm very grateful to be in a situation where I have a lot of attractive options. So I think it's just a matter of patience, and then choosing the right opportunities as they come up.
Nice. So do you think there might be like a move in your future, like new city?
Very possibly. Actually, like a few months before graduation, I got really like into researching the so-called digital nomad lifestyle. Where you basically like aren't tied to one location, but you're like constantly traveling and working just with an internet connection and kind of supporting yourself. But having like done the trip and realizing how exhausting travel can be sometimes, I definitely have a list of like cities I might want to consider my home base. Of course, St. Louis and Chicago being the main two, but I also have a lot of friends in San Francisco, so I might be looking for jobs there at some point.
Nice. Yeah, and in terms of the digital nomad thing, I think one thing is like you can stay places for months, you know? Like
of course,
I feel like
yeah.
Some people feel like they just have to be on the go if they're going to live that life, but like, you know, I mean, if you think about a place like Chicago, obviously there's still plenty of things you've never seen, even having grown up there, you know, in the area. And every city is like that. So it's not like you have to be go, 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 you know, just, you can just check out different places and move on when you get tired of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are programs which like you can apply to, and you kind of travel with a group of these kind of similar digital nomads. So then you're part of a broader community. So that's also an option to look into, but yeah, it's definitely something that I wouldn't mind exploring further.
Nice. All right, and U of Illinois. So you guys had a crazy Cinderella run in chess. So first of all, how'd you decide to go there? And then could you give our listeners sort of the short version of what happened with the chess team there?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, going out of high school, like graduating and then choosing what college I wanted to go to, at that point, like I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I mean, U of I was such a big school with so many opportunities, and I had a lot of friends there. So it was a logical choice for me to go to school. And yeah, we had a decent chess team. Now, the fact that it was such a big school, we didn't really get that much support for our team. And it was made up a lot of players who kind of grew up in Illinois, kind of playing the scholastic chess scene. So being on the team there, I had like a lot of longtime friends who I knew from childhood. I don't know if you know these names, but like Michael Odger, Akash Maduri. And we managed to form like a pretty competitive team for Pan Ams. And we also had, I mean, University of Illinois has like a big population of international students. And we were lucky enough to get one student from China. His name is Jin Liu, goes by Leo. And he joined the team having played chess like back when he was maybe like 11 or 12. And he like competed in these world youth tournaments. And he was our, I think like maybe our board 3 or board 4. And he was really the anchor of our team. And then going into Pan Ams, I mean, we had me, and then I think Michael Auger, Akash Maduri, and Leo, and we managed to actually tie for first with like all these elite schools that offered scholarships and had like full-time coaches, and we had nothing comparable to that. So it was a pretty remarkable experience. And looking back on it, I'm still kind of mind-boggled of how we actually managed to do so well. Not only our first Pan Ams, but our second Pan Ams, we also qualified for Final Four. So brings back good memories.
Okay, yeah. So I have to grill you on some details for this because good friend of mine, Dan Hart, coaches at New Trier. Again, not going to be good with the names, but so he turned me on to Chess State. So I watched the movie. Cool. As a chess teacher, kind of wanted to watch it anyway, but like figured when you were coming on, this is as good a time as any. But so, the storytelling obviously is good. Oh, and for listeners, I think it's on YouTube and it's on Vimeo, so you can check it out. But basically it's about sort of the scholastic chess scene in Chicago, which I want to get into a little bit more. But so I really enjoyed the storytelling, but like as a chess player, like it's kind of shrouded in mystery because you don't know the ratings of any of the players. And I was watching it on the iPad, so it would have been kind of a pain to look up the ratings. So I knew that it was an upset, and like I knew that like the kid from China was like had been an amazing talent, but I had sort of no awareness of the scale of like what the upset was. So what was it?
Well, are you referring to the college?
Yeah, let's start with the college. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, I haven't watched the movie in a long time,
it's not that relevant. I mean, I'm basically just asking like, what was the rating difference? Like, you were probably playing GMs, right? In the Pan Ams.
So the first Pan Ams, it was in Princeton, and we drew one of the earlier rounds, and then we managed to get like relatively good pairings until I want to say round 5 when we played Brownsville, Texas. And that was our big upset of the event. They had 2 grandmasters, Mauricio Flores and Axel Bachmann, and then they had I want to say Max Cornejo on board 3 and Katerina Nemtsova on board 4, who ended up eventually being my teammate at Webster. But yeah, that match was it was a pretty substantial upset because we won 2.5 to 1.5. I managed to draw Mauricio Flores. Our board 3, Akash Maduri, he defeated Max Cornejo in a beautiful game in the Smith-Morra Gambit. I'm pretty sure listeners can probably find that game online somewhere. And then board 4, Leo, he beat Katerina in a nice game. Okay. Actually, I remember Katerina telling me maybe it wasn't such a nice game, but we did manage to come through in the end.
So Leo in particular, I find his story interesting. So Katerina's like 2,300 FIDE, right?
Yep.
And so this guy, like, he didn't play chess and for 8 years or something, 6 years. How many years was it in between before he like came back to chess and started, beating players like that?
I'm actually not entirely sure. I think it was at least 5 or 6. And I mean, he was at least like 2,000, 2,100 when he was maybe 11 or 12 years old. But yeah, he took a big break, I think primarily focusing on academics. And even when he reached University of Illinois, I mean, he was still like, an incredibly busy student. And I don't know how much time he had for chess because he was like maxing out his credit hours. I remember one semester he was taking maybe like 21 credit hours and double majoring in something like computer science and economics. But he was very, very hardworking. And I think he was maybe a bit underrated for his first 2 tournaments, and that helped us out because he was able to play board 4 for our team. And with a player like that, I don't think he lost a single game between the first Pan Ams and the second Pan Ams. And he won all 6 games at the first Pan Ams. And then I think he held maybe a few draws at the second Pan Ams that he played in. So definitely a talented player. And I don't think he plays actively anymore, but it was certainly good having him on our team when he did play.
Sounds like he's too well-rounded. The downfall of many a chess player.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing that you've had these like sort of parallel experiences of like Cinderella stories. I mean, I guess in high school it wasn't as much of a Cinderella story, since, like you said, you were the first board, and I'm sure your team was pretty strong. But for the listeners who don't know, could you tell them a little bit about sort of the Chicago State scholastic setup, particularly the high school tournament?
Sure. I think you're referring to the Illinois High School Team State, which is not actually held in Chicago.
Sorry. Yeah, that is
it's
correct.
Held in
on both counts.
It's held in Peoria, Illinois, and it's been held there for many, many years. And it's one of the biggest team tournaments in the world. And it's primarily made up of like high school players that don't even have a U.S. chess membership. They mainly just compete for their high school teams. And it's pretty unique because it's an 8-board tournament. And I think there's, like, every year there's about 130 teams that compete. So there's tremendous turnout, at least like 1,500 players. And it's a pretty awesome atmosphere to be a part of.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it just seems like such a shocking number. Like, it's so many kids playing chess. I mean, I know Chicago is a big city, but so do a lot of these kids, like, is your impression that a lot of them just take it up in high school, or are a lot of them like playing throughout their childhood and then continuing at high school?
Well, I should note that this tournament, it's not just Chicago, it's the whole state of Illinois.
Sorry that I keep saying that.
Yeah, no problem.
I mean, yeah. Illinois.
I mean, Illinois is mostly known for Chicago.
Right.
There are other parts.
But I'm aware
that
it's a state. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So, like, Illinois high schools are they kind of feed into I don't know if feed in is the right term, but there's what's called the Illinois High School. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking here. I think it's just the Illinois High School Association that coordinates like tournaments for major sports, like any major sport that you can think of, including chess and maybe some of these more obscure things like debate. And because so many high schools are familiar with this IHSA, then they're able to, first of all, find out about like the state chess tournament and then field a team. And unlike some of the other state competitions in Illinois, like tennis, where you actually have to qualify for state, with this tournament, any school that can field enough players can be part of the state tournament. So I think for a lot of schools, it offers prestige for them that they can participate in a state championship event.
Nice. And I mean, I don't want to go too far into like the history, but so how do you think it came to be that like all these schools have chess programs? Like, it's just, is it like, is something in the water in Chicago, or it's just sort of like interest fuels interest, or sorry, in Illinois?
No problem.
What is it?
Yeah, I'm actually not entirely sure. I mean, from my experience, I was lucky to go to a high school which already had like a significant chess culture, chess history, where we had many like strong players before me that competed. And I think the movie Chess State, I think it delves in a little bit to the history of Illinois high school chess.
Yeah.
And I know that there is a strong interest for chess across the state. I'm not entirely sure what fuels it. And I honestly don't know, I don't know why the teams and the players on these teams don't compete more in like U.S. chess events, but it's maybe something to look into a bit deeper. Yeah.
Well, in any event, I mean, the main thing that interests me, the main thread that I had, that I wanted to know more about, was just like what's replicable. You know, that's why I'm sort of asking these questions, is because like I've talked before on the podcast about how much more fun chess can be as a team event. And in the United States, anyone who's ever played in one of the amateur team events probably has experienced this. And, international listeners, like from watching the Olympiad and stuff like that, and I don't like the Bundesliga and so on and so on. It's just, it sort of solves the one, I wouldn't call it a problem in chess, because the individual aspect is part of what makes it appealing, but I feel like it's sort of like the perfect mix when you're still competing on your own, but you have like a, kindred spirits that you're playing next to.
Oh, of course. And I definitely enjoy like team events a lot more than individual events. Not only can you like cheer on your teammates, but then you can kind of cope with losses better. Sometimes if you have a bad result, but your team still wins, it doesn't matter. So it's definitely something great to be a part of. And I'll definitely miss playing for the Webster team. Yeah,
I was going to ask, did you feel like Webster, with so many sort of strong players, and they say in like the NBA or whatever, like every player is their own corporation. I don't think that's the case, like, with Ray Robson or someone like that, but still, they're so invested in their careers and their development is so important. So did you feel like the team spirit was as strong as it was at like the other places that you played?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe this is one thing that separates Webster from other teams, is just kind of the team camaraderie, is the fact that like we are friends kind of outside just the chess aspect of things. And especially like it felt like maybe the last semester, 2 semesters that I attended Webster, like when we actually got a couple of ping pong tables for our chess office, and we would just hang out like all the time, like play ping pong with each other. I was good friends with Ray. We would play tennis on various occasions whenever we had free time. So kind of the concept of doing things outside of chess, I think, kind of contributes to the overall team success.
Nice. And what about the studying? Like, did you guys have, some of the players are so strong. There's only a handful of people that necessarily can teach them. So did you guys ever have like group lectures given to you?
Yeah. So we would meet on a good weekly basis. It would vary throughout the year. Like if there was a strong tournament coming up, then there would be weekly meetings. And then of course, before like a big tournament like Pan Am's or Final Four, there would be sometimes like daily kind of boot camp type sessions. I will say like kind of between finals week ending and the start of Pan Am's, we would be at the chess office every day, kind of training on various aspects of the game. So there was a good variety of things that I think kept everyone studying and staying sharp. And there's a good variety of training methods too that we used between like working in groups for opening preparation, and then kind of doing of course, like tactics, training exercises. So I think it was pretty well rounded in terms of the training approach.
So where would you get the tactics that you guys worked on?
Susan, she's very good at finding like good and difficult material for especially strong players to work on. And she would never run out of tough material for us.
Nice. And like, how long would you guys spend on a problem?
Well, some of us would spend much longer than others.
Right, of course.
And like Ray would usually be the one who would like bolt through all the problems quicker than anyone else. But I don't know. I think usually how it worked, we would maybe get 4 problems and then maybe like 45 minutes to an hour to work through them. Of course, these numbers could vary, but it would kind of be competitive because you're kind of racing to see who can solve more problems in the given amount of time. And I'm sad to say that most times I didn't perform as well as the rest of the team, but it's still a great learning experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shame in that. Mm-hmm. Cool. So, Eric, I'm going to use you as a guinea pig because I personally have really enjoyed the last few guests, but we haven't had any sort of we haven't had as many like hardcore chess players who are, have been working hard to improve. So could you give some book recommendations or general improvement advice for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I don't know about book recommendations. I can give maybe a few. And maybe you can help me out here. Like, do you know, like, who are your listeners? Like, what are their chess capabilities? I'm sure there's a wide variance.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I get a lot of emails, and I would say it runs the gamut. I mean, I would say most are tournament players, but rating-wise, I mean, there's a lot of sort of skews more towards adults, although I've gotten a couple emails from high school kids. Shout out to the high school listeners. But I would say rating-wise, it ranges from 1,200, and, there are strong players like you and some grandmasters who listen. So, but, the grandmasters who listen, and people like you, I think we're more interested in the lifestyle. Like,
of course, yeah.
And then as you go down the rating spectrum, I feel like listeners are more interested in, like, they're obsessed with chess and they want to improve, and like when they
just want practical advice,
and when they're at the gym and like driving their car, it's like the one time they can't do anything and this is the next best thing. So for those people, what would you advise?
It's a tough question, and
it might be too broad.
In terms of book recommendations, I'm not a huge fan of actually using chess books for study. I will say one of my favorite books, and I've probably mentioned this before in maybe some articles or some YouTube videos, but this book, Imagination in Chess by Gabrindashvili. And it's one of the few books that I've actually covered most likely start to finish. And it's essentially just a book filled with exercises, but it's grouped by kind of how you figure out the solution to the problem. And it's a really interesting breakdown because every chapter is kind of a different type of thought process. So there's all these different approaches to kind of how you go about solving a problem and what to look for over the board. So I found that to be very useful. And actually the one binge that I did of solving problems in that book, right after I played a couple tournaments, and those were some of my best performances. I gained maybe 100 points within 2 tournaments and got my IM title. Wow. And I have to give some credit to that book.
Okay, that's a strong recommendation, everyone. Imagination in Chess, and I will put it on the book webpage. So what was, because you're at the age where you're sort of bridging the book generation, or perhaps maybe post-book generation in chess, because now with tactics trainers, obviously, up-and-coming players still have to know their history and still have to learn the books, but they're able to sort of optimize their abilities like in ways that the old men like me couldn't. So how did you study aside from books?
Yeah, apart from books, I would just highly recommend becoming good at using ChessBase. I mean, the ability to leverage technology to help chess improvement is just so powerful these days, between the capabilities of like the newer engines, opening databases, and just being able to kind of crunch through all the recent games. And this applies especially in opening preparation, and also like specific preparation for opponents. And I think like even young players, this is maybe a good recommendation, is kind of learn how to essentially prepare for someone, especially in these longer tournaments where maybe it's a game a day, and you're pairing the night before. You want to know like the best approach to opening preparation, how to kind of not only look up all your opponent's games, but also kind of understand their style, understand what opening is most likely, and then being able to kind of best prepare for whatever opponent. So
let's say you have, say, 2.5 hours to prepare for someone the night before. Like, how would you divide your time? Or I mean, you probably don't think about it. Yeah, you probably don't think about it that concretely. But I mean, if you're two think back about it. Anyway, go ahead.
Of course. I mean, I spent like a good portion of my Europe trip like during these tournaments. This is what I would do at night. Like once the pairings would go up, I would like extensively stalk my opponent's games online. And
so would you use ChessBase or just like online? You mentioned online, like ChessDB or Chess Games, or
So I'm kind of lazy, and I don't necessarily update my ChessBase database like that frequently. So what I'll do, is use this website ChessDB, which I'm not sure like how many U.S. players actually get into this, but like for these European tournaments, ChessDB has like the most recent games and is pretty reliable in like providing all their games in a single PGN file. So for most of my opponents in Europe, I would, of course, look up their name, download their PGN file from ChessDB, and then, based on what color I am, I would filter their games to whatever color I'm playing against, and then determine kind of their whole opening repertoire, and then look for holes in their repertoire. And then based on what I find, I'll kind of decide what opening to play.
Okay.
And I should note that this one more thing that for myself, and this might be slightly unusual compared to maybe other players of my level, but I don't really have a set opening repertoire that I stick with. There are openings that I'll play maybe more frequently, but I usually base my openings off of what my opponent plays and off of what I find during preparation.
Okay, so are you looking at the results, or are you looking for like a position where they just didn't know the line, or like what piques your interest when you're going through their openings?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually what I'm looking for is lines that they play where I might have some new idea, or I might feel like I'm better prepared. I'll usually look for lines that they play where I've had something in mind that I've been wanting to play that I feel like maybe they could walk into. I could try and think of some examples. I'm sure I had many of these moments over the course of my trip. And actually, if I'm sure like a lot of listeners can follow maybe some basic opening moves, but I'll give you one example of one kind of nugget of preparation that I was lucky enough to unleash. There was one game in Romania. I realized my opponent played I think it was some kind of Sicilian type dragon against a closed Sicilian. So e4, c5, knight c3, g6. And the kind of new idea that I had in store for that was to play h4.
Harry.
With a very early aggressive just pawn lunge, wanting to play h5. And the idea behind this move is after h4, the most likely move for black is to play h5, preventing white from playing h5. And then the continuation for white is to play d4. And it's actually very similar to like one of these main lines with d4 right away, only that h4 and h5 are included. And based on that, there's different ideas that apply to the position. And if I'm looking at it right before the game, I'll be a lot better prepared than my opponent, who was surprised by h4 on move 3.
Yeah, because that's pretty out of left field. It's going to be, if he's looking through your games. I mean, if you have one with that line, like that changes things drastically, I guess.
Certainly. And I put a lot more value when I like choose my openings. I put a lot more value on like surprise moves,
right?
Where maybe it's not the best move objectively, but if I'm forcing my opponent to think so early and they're taken off guard and I'm well prepared in the position that will arise, it's probably worth playing over maybe a line that we're both familiar with.
Nice. Okay, well that is awesome advice for people who are at a level where like they can look up their opponents. But let's try to do some more practical advice for people like just generally. So I know you've written a little bit about time trouble and working, like how underrated it is, and how you know, as like sort of a skill in chess. So what has been your experience with time management, and what advice could you give people about it?
Yeah, it's one of these issues which it's sometimes hard to cope with. Like, okay, even after I wrote that article, I gave all this advice of how to try and avoid time trouble. I still get into it myself, and it takes a lot of discipline, especially like during the game. And there's lots of practical advice that I've heard kind of over the years. One tip that I think it's so simple, but it, like when I follow it, I'll usually almost always avoid time trouble, is what's called the 10-minute rule. Is you should never spend longer than 10 minutes on any given move. And I think the reason for this is if you're spending over 10 minutes, you're probably overthinking things, and any like kind of normal position doesn't require more than 10 minutes of thought. Obviously there are exceptions, but if you can avoid taking like these long thinks on any given move or on consecutive moves, then I think you can drastically avoid getting into time trouble. Another practical advice is just like be better prepared in the opening.
Yeah.
And follow some of this preparation advice, like get your opponent out of their comfort zone before they get you out of your comfort zone. And if you can do that, then that can kind of give you some momentum going forward for the rest of the game.
Yeah, that's good advice for sure. Advice I could stand to follow. Cool. All right. So what about like middle game, end game? Do you have any like standout recommendations for how to work on particular phases of the game?
Yeah, and these are like very kind of vast, broad stages of the game. It's hard to maybe pinpoint like a specific thing to do. Well, I will say, like any like serious player, even like a weaker player, players of any level should do this, is save all of your games digitally, primarily to ChessBase. And that way you can have like a good kind of data set of your games, especially your losses. And it might be easier to do this with a coach, but you can try and do it like alone too, maybe with an engine. Try and identify certain tendencies in your games, and ideally try and identify like what is going wrong and why you're losing games. And if you can do that, if it's maybe time related, if it's in the end game, you're not calculating ideally, if you're making maybe like careless mistakes, one move blunders, these are all different issues which need to be addressed. And I think probably the most efficient way to improve is doing just this, is identifying your weaknesses and then working to improve them.
Yeah, I agree. One of our guests, I mean, obviously we've had enough guests where the chess advice runs the gamut, but that kind of echoes what Chess Explained, Christoph Zalecki, recommended. And I took his advice to heart, and it did make a big difference in sort of like that strain of advice really helped me a lot. So I definitely echo that. Like it's so easy to get lost in the weeds of an individual game, and like forget or beat yourself up about some blunder. But there's probably more to it than just the actual blunder, like the time management, the opening, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's
of course.
Good advice.
And I'll also say that like mindset and like the psychological approach is just so important in this regard. Like being able to like accept your losses, but then have the work ethic to kind of go back and take an analytical approach rather than just kind of being emotional about it. And I think a lot of players, especially younger players, maybe don't know how to cope with losses and don't know like how to recover from a loss and take it as a learning experience. And I've noticed that, like, especially with students, when they can have a more mature approach, then that's when improvement can really take place.
Yeah. Yeah. Process-based. And yeah, in a similar vein, I read that you wrote about having goals that are not related to the outcome. of your games. Like,
exactly. Yeah, I think that's very important, as you focus on like how you improve and not just like the final rating or title or whatever.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, Eric. I mean, I think you've given the listeners a lot of red meat for new paths to explore, new approaches to take in terms of dissecting their game and like ways to study and stuff like that. So, having done that, obviously, I want to get back to outside of chess improvement. So,
sure.
So, what else are you into? What are your outside of? I know you're a tennis player. What else? What are your outside of chess hobbies? Travel.
Yeah, I've gone through like different phases of like different different sort of interests. Tennis was a big thing in high school. I played 4 years on my varsity tennis team. Of course, we talked about earlier, like photography is big interest of mine. I recently bought a drone, and
nice.
I took that to Europe. I don't know if you saw some of my clips on Facebook, but I managed to get some pretty cool aerial footage of some of the European scenery.
Any trouble getting your drone through customs anywhere?
Not through customs. My mom was actually really nervous of me taking the drone before I went on the trip, because all this stuff in the media, she thought I might be mistaken as like a U.S. spy. But it was completely okay, and it was especially nice to fly in Banasque with like the open mountain areas. So yeah, that's I mean, like anything kind of visual and digital, I've been really into. I'm trying to think what else out of my my area of study and out of chess. I've been going through this recent interest of cryptocurrency.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny to me that it's penetrated the chess world, because I still have my foot in the poker world a little bit and follow a lot of poker people on Twitter. So I just haven't had the bandwidth to get into the cryptocurrency thing, but something has changed in the last 6 months where like worlds are colliding. Like I've got like, all right, my Twitter feed is chess Twitter, poker Twitter, finance Twitter, basically, because those are my three biggest interests. And now they're all three. It used to be just poker was talking about cryptocurrency, because like the online thing, it's like was an easy way to transact. And then it blew up in finance, obviously. And now like even chess players are talking about it. So anyway, sorry, go on, educate me.
I mean, yeah, I'm fairly new to the space, and I think because it's received so much media attention, especially in recent months with Bitcoin just like skyrocketing, I really don't know if it's just a fad or if it's I'm hoping it's something that's going to stay around for long term and get bigger. But yeah, I've had some friends on the West Coast who've made a good amount of money just investing in not only Bitcoin, but like all these other kind of altcoin currencies, Ethereum, and some of these others. And I think it's very interesting space.
I mean, the returns have been insane. So,
right. And I remember like some random point during my Europe trip, Nakamura just messaged me out of the blue, just like something like Bitcoin exclamation point. It was just like, taking off.
That's a classic Nakamura message for sure. Right. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with the diffusion model. Malcolm Gladwell wrote about it, but someone else did before. But basically the idea is that there's like different phases of like a school of thought taking hold or a trend developing. So there's the innovators, the early adopters, the late adopters. Oh man, and I'm going to forget because it's been a while, but basically there's two more phases, like it basically acceptance and then the laggards, although the fourth one's not called acceptance. So whenever I look at a trend like that, and I've got some scars on my back in the investing world from like,
I'm sure
from learning lessons the hard way, I'm always trying to place like where they are within that cycle. And, with Bitcoin, I think we can safely rule out innovators and early adopters. But beyond that, I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's the fifth inning or the eighth inning. But if it's the fifth inning, there's still a lot of money to be made. So,
oh, of course. And I think, that's the big question. I don't know if anyone truly knows. And I mean, if we did know if it still has a lot of room to grow, then there's certainly a lot more money to be made. I'll tell kind of a funny story. Earlier today, I was giving a lesson to a young student, and like at the beginning of the lesson, all he wanted to talk about was how he's like buying like his own like custom, I don't know, mining hardware, and he just wants to mine Bitcoin. And he was asking me like if he should like make this huge investment to mine Bitcoin and get a good return. And I honestly didn't really know what to say to him, but it's definitely reached that level of popularity where even
that's funny.
Just random people are telling me about it.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, the adage in the stock world is like when the cab driver starts to tell you about the stocks that he owns, it's time to get out. But,
that's true, yeah.
But having said that, you know, it'll probably double before it crashes. Cool. Well, Eric, I think I may be out of questions. Let's see. Just looking at my list here. Yeah, I think I've got everything covered. I mean, I'm definitely interested to see like what it sounds like you're sort of at an inflection point in your career. So I'm definitely curious to see what happens, what your next move is.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm curious too. And I'm also excited to see what opportunities I can pursue. And
any, like, how hard are you going to be hitting the chess? Like, let's say you take a job outside of chess. What do you think? How do you think it'll fit into your life?
I mean, ideally, I would like to keep chess as some part of my life. I mean, it's been such a big part of my life for so many years. And even if it's just like teaching on the side, I've been very much inspired by what a lot of other players are doing, like Mezgan Amanov, Kosta Kavutsky, like kind of starting their own like online courses where you can reach a much broader audience, but still kind of put in the same time it takes for like a single lesson. So I think that's definitely an area. I mean, I've already begun kind of delving into and trying to identify the best possibilities, and already have like a few website domains bought, and that might be a project to pursue before I actually commit to a full-time job.
Excellent. Well, as I always tell my guests, if we haven't actually done it yet, but if anyone ever wants to pop on and, like, you know, as I told Pontus Carlson, like do a short little, like, hey, I talked about this and now I'm doing it, you know, or like Ben Feingold with the Atlanta Chess Center. So yeah, if you ever like get it together and want to announce it to the audience, give me a shout. I'm sure people would be interested.
Sure. Yeah, that would be really cool. And I mean, I wanted to ask you, like, where do you see this podcast going in the next like year, 2 years, 5 years?
Yeah, so
it seems like you're getting like a great audience.
Yeah, it's growing, so that's been gratifying. You know, since you asked, I might as well say to the audience that the shakedown is coming. I'll be asking for donations at some point, but you know, nothing required or anything like that. But like, you know, I spend about 3 to 4 hours a week doing this. So basically, I'd just mainly be looking to recoup my costs, and you know, my dream scenario is to make like my hourly rate for private lessons for the time I put in, you know, so no grand ambitions, but if I ever achieve that goal with this podcast, I have ideas for other chess related podcasts, but I'm definitely at my maximum in terms of, you know, non-paying side hustles.
Sure.
But I love doing it. And yeah, you know, so people sometimes ask me if I would like run out of guests, but you know, I mean, my list alone is like 150 people, and like, you know, people that have been on are going to come back on, and there's 1,500 grandmasters alone in the world. So, you know, not all of them speak English, but a lot do. So, yeah, hopefully keep this going for a long time, as long as...
yeah, I'm sure you won't run out of guests anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about it, but I have been asked about it, so... But yeah,
is there one person that like you really want to have on the podcast that you haven't had a chance yet?
That's a good question. I mean, it's tough. I mean, when I brainstormed this and I put off making this for like a year, I mean, Hikaru was high up on the list of like people who I thought would be interesting and that I thought I could probably get at some point. So, and Svidler kind of similar. I mean, after this New Yorker profile, obviously, like everyone else, I'm really interested in Aronian. Maurice Ashley, who I know a little bit, like, you know, sooner or later, have to get him on. Big one, of course, dream guest. Speaking, like, big picture would be Judith Polgar. What about you? Like, who would be your top couple dream guests?
If I wanted to see on this podcast?
Yeah.
I was going to say Maurice. I think he has a lot of interesting stories to tell, and he's really well spoken. Maybe another person, he might be hard to get, but he's always someone who I've looked up to, is Josh Waitskin.
Yeah, you mentioned the Tim Ferriss podcast. You probably heard him on there. Right. So it's like a joke that he doesn't do media. Yeah. So, you know,
right.
Maybe I can get it, but it seems unlikely based on their interactions.
Well, if you keep growing, you never know.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great. I mean, I'm a big fan of his book, and we're the same age, so you know, I was always like 25th on the top 50 list, and he was always first when I was growing up. But those would definitely be good. All right, so Eric, people, as you know, I'm going to ask you if people want to reach you. How should they do so?
There's a lot of ways to reach me. I have a few different websites. I have Twitter. So my Twitter feed is IM_Rosen. My chess website is imrosen.com. IMROSEN. I have a personal website, eric-rosen.com. And both of those sites have contact forms. I'm sure people can also pretty easily find me on Facebook too. So whatever works best for the listeners, I'm good with any option.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, Eric. It was a lot of fun. And good luck with figuring out what your next step is.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Perpetual Chess. To hear more episodes, give feedback, or suggest guests, go to perpetualchesspod.com. If you like the show, please help me out by telling your friends and giving me a high rating on iTunes. I'll be back next week with another episode of the Perpetual Chess Podcast.